I watched my aunt load the last box of my grandmother's belongings into her Range Rover. My grandmother had been gone for 3 days. I'd spent 2 years caring for her, sleeping on the floor next to her bed when she was too scared to be alone, holding her hand through every chemo session, learning to change IVs and manage her pain medication. 2 years of my life. And in 1 week, my aunt had swept in and convinced my dying grandmother to change her will. I was left with nothing. Not the house I'd lived in since I was 16. Not a single photograph. Not even my grandmother's wedding ring I'd watched her wear every single day. My aunt looked at me standing on the lawn, my 2 duffel bags at my feet, and smiled. Not a sad smile. Not an apologetic smile. A satisfied smile. How did I end up here? And how did I find the diary that would destroy her completely? If this story already touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with me to hear what happened next. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You might feel less alone in your own struggles. My name is Riley Morgan, and I'm 18 years old. 3 years ago, my life was pretty normal. I was 15, stressing about algebra tests, spending weekends sketching in the park, and living with my mom in our small apartment across town. My mom and I were close. It was always just the 2 of us. My dad left before I was born, so I never knew him. Mom worked as a nurse, pulling double shifts, but she always made time for me. She'd come home exhausted and still ask about my day, still help me with homework, still tell me I was going to do something amazing with my art someday. Then, on a Tuesday in October when I was 16, a drunk driver ran a red light. My mom died instantly. I remember the police officer at our apartment door, the way the world just stopped making sense. The feeling that I was falling and nothing could catch me. I had no other family except my grandmother, Maggie Morgan, my mom's mother, and my mom's younger sister, Diane. My Aunt Grandma Maggie didn't hesitate. The day after my mom's funeral, she picked me up from the foster care intake office and brought me to her house. A small, beautiful craftsman home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden out back that my grandfather had planted before he died. Grandma wrapped me in her arms and told me I was home now, that I was safe, that we'd get through this together. For the first year, we did okay. I mean, neither of us was really okay. We'd both lost the person we loved most. But we had each other. Grandma taught me how to make her famous apple pie. We watched old movies together on Friday nights. She'd show me photos of my mom as a kid, and we'd laugh and cry at the same time. I went to school, kept my grades up, and started to believe that maybe life could be okay again. My Aunt Diane called sometimes. Maybe once every few months. She'd promised to visit but never showed up. Grandma would make excuses for her. Diane's busy with her business, sweetheart. She has her own life. I didn't really care. I'd only met Aunt Diane a handful of times before my mom died. She lived 2 hours away and never seemed interested in family stuff. At Christmas, she'd send an impersonal gift card. On birthdays, sometimes a text message. She wasn't mean exactly. She was just absent. Then, in March of my junior year, Grandma got diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. I came home from school and found her sitting at the kitchen table, the medical papers in front of her, and she just looked so small. So scared. She told me the doctors said treatment would be aggressive. Chemo, maybe surgery, a lot of uncertainty. She was 72 years old. I was 17. And I knew in that moment that everything was about to change again. The first few months of treatment were brutal. Grandma was so sick from the chemo, I'd help her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk alone. I learned to cook meals she could actually keep down. Bland soups, toast, ginger tea. I'd sit with her in the infusion center every Wednesday afternoon, doing homework while poison dripped into her veins to kill the cancer. She tried to stay positive. She'd smile at me and say, "We're fighters, Riley. Morgan women don't give up." I called my aunt to tell her about the diagnosis. I thought maybe now she'd show up. Maybe now she'd help. Aunt Diane sounded concerned on the phone. She said she'd visit soon. She never did. Not that month. Not the next month. Not for the entire first year of Grandma's treatment. She'd text Grandma occasionally, "Thinking of you. Stay strong." But that was it. Meanwhile, I was the one holding the bucket when Grandma threw up. I was the one researching clinical trials at 2 in the morning. I was the one missing school to take her to doctor appointments. By the fall of my senior year, I realized I couldn't do both. I couldn't be a full-time caregiver and a full-time student. Grandma's cancer had spread. She needed round-the-clock care. Home health nurses came 3 times a week, but that wasn't enough. Grandma needed someone there. someone who loved her. So I made the decision to defer my senior year. I dropped out temporarily with plans to get my GED later. My school counselor tried to talk me out of it. My friend Emma begged me to reconsider, but I couldn't leave Grandma alone. For the next year and a half, my life revolved around caring for my grandmother. I learned things no 18-year-old should have to know. How to change a central line dressing, how to manage a morphine pump, how to reposition someone in bed to prevent bed sores, how to have conversations about death and wills and DNR orders. Grandma and I talked about everything during those long nights. She told me stories about my grandfather, about my mom as a little girl, about her own dreams and regrets. She also told me about my future. Grandma had been a school teacher before she retired. She'd saved carefully. She owned her house outright. My grandfather had paid off the mortgage years before he died. She had retirement savings. Not a fortune, but enough. And she told me more than once that when she was gone, everything would be mine. The house, the savings, everything. "You've sacrificed so much for me, Riley," she'd say, holding my hand with her thin, cold fingers. "You gave up your teenage years. You deserve to have a future. You're going to art school. You're going to have the life your mom wanted for you. I never cared about the money, honestly. I just wanted more time with her. But knowing I'd have something, that I wouldn't be left with nothing after she died, it helped me breathe a little easier. I could finish my education. I could go to college. I wouldn't end up on the street. Aunt Diane still didn't visit. In 2 years of Grandma's illness, my aunt came to the house maybe 4 times. Once, about 6 months into treatment, she showed up unannounced, stayed for an hour, took some photos with Grandma for her social media, and left. I remember Grandma was so happy to see her. She kept saying, "It's so good to see you, honey. I've missed you." And Aunt Diane just scrolled through her phone and complained about traffic. Another time, Aunt Diane called and asked Grandma if she could borrow $5,000 for her boutique business. Grandma, who would never say no to her own daughter, sent her the money. I never saw any indication that Aunt Diane paid it back. I didn't trust my aunt. There was something about the way she looked at Grandma, not with love, but with calculation. Like she was assessing value. But I was just the granddaughter. The teenager? What did I know? That's when everything changed. It was a Monday morning in September, exactly 2 weeks before Grandma died. I woke up on the cot next to Grandma's hospital bed in her bedroom. She'd been declining rapidly. The hospice nurse had told me we were probably looking at days, maybe a couple of weeks. I'd been sleeping next to Grandma's bed for 3 weeks straight because she was scared of dying alone in the dark. Every night, I'd wake up multiple times to check that she was still breathing. That morning, I went downstairs to make Grandma's breakfast. Oatmeal with honey, the only thing she could still swallow. When I came back upstairs, there was a car in the driveway. A white Range Rover. My stomach dropped. Aunt Diane was here. I walked into Grandma's room and there she was. Aunt Diane, in expensive yoga pants and a designer jacket, sitting in the chair next to Grandma's bed. She looked up at me with this bright, fake smile. "Riley? Oh my God, look at you! You look so tired, sweetie. Are you taking care of yourself?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "Where have you been for 2 years?" But Grandma looked so happy to see her daughter. Her face was lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. So I swallowed my anger and just nodded. "I'm fine. Grandma, I made you breakfast." Aunt Diane stood up and took the bowl from my hands. "Oh, let me do that. You've been doing so much, Riley, you must be exhausted. Why don't you go take a break? Go take a walk or something. I'll sit with Mom for a while. I should have said no. I should have stayed. But I was exhausted. I hadn't left the house in 3 days. And part of me thought maybe this is good. Maybe Aunt Diane finally cares. Maybe she'll actually help, so I left. I took a walk around the block, came back 20 minutes later, and went to my room to shower and change clothes. When I came back downstairs an hour later, Aunt Diane was still there. And she wasn't alone. There was a man in a suit in the living room, a lawyer. I recognized him, Mr. Patterson, the lawyer who'd helped Grandma write her will 2 years ago when she first got diagnosed. My heart started pounding. "What's going on?" I asked. Aunt Diane turned to me with that same bright smile. "Oh, Riley, don't worry about it. Mom just wanted to update some paperwork. You know, estate stuff. Boring adult things." I looked at Mr. Patterson. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He gathered his papers, said goodbye to Aunt Diane, and left. Aunt Diane turned to me and said, "Mom's resting now. I'm going to stay for a few days to help out. You must be so relieved, but I wasn't relieved. I was terrified. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. For the next week, Aunt Diane was suddenly everywhere. She showed up every single day. She'd bring meals that Grandma couldn't eat. She'd sit by Grandma's bed and talk loudly about her boutique, her problems, her life, while Grandma drifted in and out of consciousness. Grandma was on a lot of morphine by then for the pain. She slept most of the time. When she was awake, she was confused. She'd call me by my mom's name sometimes. She didn't always know what day it was. I tried to talk to Grandma about the lawyer visit. Grandma, did you change your will? I asked her one afternoon when Aunt Diane had gone to pick up lunch. Grandma looked at me with foggy eyes. Will? What will, sweetheart? Your will. The lawyer came. Did you sign something? She just looked confused. I don't remember, Diane said. Something about making sure everyone's taken care of. She's so good to me. I'm so glad she's here. My blood ran cold. But what could I do? I was 18 years old. Grandma was dying. I couldn't prove anything. And every time I tried to ask Aunt Diane about it, she'd smile sweetly and say, Riley, honey, this doesn't concern you. This is between me and my mother. Grandma died on a Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after Aunt Diane's first visit. I was holding her hand. Aunt Diane was on her phone in the corner of the room. Grandma opened her eyes one last time, looked at me and whispered, I love you, sweet girl. I'm sorry. Then she was gone. I don't remember the next few days clearly. Emma came and stayed with me. The hospice nurse came and officially pronounced Grandma dead. The funeral home came and took her body. I was numb. I couldn't eat. I couldn't cry. I just felt hollow. The funeral was 3 days later. It was small. Some of Grandma's friends from church, a few neighbors. Aunt Diane gave a eulogy about what an amazing mother Grandma was, how much she'd miss her, how grateful she was for all the time they'd spent together in the final years. I sat in the front row and wanted to vomit. All the time they'd spent together? She'd barely visited. But everyone believed her. Everyone hugged her and told her how strong she was. After the funeral, we went back to Grandma's house. My house, the only home I had. Aunt Diane pulled me aside in the kitchen. Riley, we need to talk. She handed me a folder. Inside was a copy of Grandma's will. A new will, dated 1 week before Grandma's death. The will left the house and all of Grandma's savings to Aunt Diane. To me, it left $5,000. That was it. I stared at the paper. I read it 3 times. I looked up at Aunt Diane. This can't be real, she shrugged. I'm sorry, Riley, I know you were expecting more. But Mom made her decision. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I'm her daughter, after all. I took care of her for 2 years, I whispered. I gave up everything. And that was very sweet of you, Aunt Diane said. Her voice was flat. No emotion. But Mom and I talked, and she decided this was fair. You're young. You'll be fine. I'm going to need you to move out by the end of the week. I'm putting the house on the market. I couldn't breathe. Move out? Where am I supposed to go? You'll figure it out. You're 18. You're an adult now. That's when I realized. She'd planned this. The last-minute visits. The lawyer. Getting Grandma to sign papers while she was sedated and confused. Aunt Diane had swooped in and stolen everything. And there was nothing I could do about it. I called Mr. Patterson, the lawyer. He told me the will was legal. Grandma had signed it. There were witnesses, Aunt Diane and a notary. Unless I could prove undue influence or that Grandma wasn't mentally competent, the will would stand. But that would require lawyers and legal battles and money I didn't have. I had $5,000. That was supposed to last me until... What? Until I figured out my entire life? 4 days after the funeral, I packed my things. Everything I owned fit into 2 duffel bags. Clothes, my sketchbooks, a few photos of my mom and Grandma. That was it. I stood on the front lawn of the house I'd lived in for 2 years and watched my aunt change the locks. She hired movers to clear out Grandma's things. They threw away furniture, donated clothes, tossed boxes without even looking inside. I tried to stop them. Wait, that's my grandmother's jewelry box. She wanted me to have that. The mover looked at Aunt Diane. She shook her head. That stays. It's part of the estate. I lost everything that day. Not just the house and the money. I lost every physical reminder of my grandmother. Every photo album. Every piece of her art. Every letter she'd ever written. Aunt Diane took it all. Emma's family let me stay with them temporarily. I slept on their couch. I cried myself to sleep every single night. I felt so stupid. I'd trusted Grandma when she said I'd be taken care of. I'd trusted the system. I'd trusted that people couldn't just steal from a dying woman. But they could. And they did. I tried to move on. I got a job at a coffee shop. I started saving the $5,000, trying to stretch it as far as possible. I looked into GD programs. I told myself I'd survive this. But inside I was dying. I felt so betrayed. Not by Grandma, I knew she'd been manipulated. But by Aunt Diane, by the universe, by the unfairness of it all. Then, 5 weeks after Grandma's death, I got a call from Mr. Nathan Reed, Grandma's next-door neighbor. He was an older man, a widower who'd been friends with Grandma for 20 years. He'd visited her often during her illness, bringing flowers from his garden, sitting with her when I needed to run errands. "Riley, can you come by my house?" he asked on the phone. "I have something that belonged to your grandmother. Something I think you need to see." I drove to his house the next day. He invited me in, made me tea, and then handed me a shoebox. "Your grandmother gave this to me about 3 months before she died," he said. "She told me that if anything happened to her, if things didn't seem right, I should give this to you." Inside the box was a leather journal. My grandmother's handwriting covered every page. It was her diary. She'd been keeping it for years. My hands shook as I opened it. The entries went back 10 years. At first, they were mundane. Thoughts about her garden, memories of my grandfather, prayers for my mom. Then, about 7 years ago, the entries started mentioning Aunt Diane, and they weren't good. I sat in Mr. Reed's living room and read for 3 hours. I read about how Aunt Diane had asked Grandma for money repeatedly over the years. 5,000 here. 10,000 there. Always with a sob story about her business, her rent, her debt. Grandma had given her over $60,000 in 7 years. Money that was supposed to be Grandma's retirement savings. Aunt Diane never paid any of it back. I read about the time, 4 years ago, when Aunt Diane had stolen Grandma's credit card and racked up $15,000 in charges at casinos. Grandma had found out and confronted her. Aunt Diane had cried and apologized and promised to get help for her gambling addiction. She never did. Grandma paid off the credit card and never reported it. I read about the forged checks. 3 years ago, Aunt Diane had stolen Grandma's checkbook and written checks to herself, forging Grandma's signature. Grandma had discovered it when her bank called about suspicious activity. $10,000 gone. Again, Grandma didn't press charges. She just closed that account and opened a new one. But the worst entries were from the last 2 years. The years I'd been living with Grandma, the years of her cancer treatment. Grandma wrote about how guilty she felt for burdening me. She wrote about how much she admired my strength and sacrifice. She wrote about how she was going to leave everything to me, to make sure I had a future, to honor the way I'd cared for her. And then, in the final weeks, the entries changed. Grandma wrote about Aunt Diane's sudden visits. She wrote about feeling confused and pressured. There was an entry from the day the lawyer came. Grandma wrote, "Diane brought a lawyer today. She says I need to update my will. She says it's not fair that Riley gets everything when Diane is my daughter. She says Riley will be fine because she's young." I was so tired. I signed papers. I don't remember what they said. Diane promised she'd take care of Riley. She promised. The last entry was dated 2 days before Grandma died. I'm scared I made a mistake. I want to talk to Riley, but Diane is always here. She says not to worry Riley with estate talk. She says everything will be fair, but I don't feel right about this. If I could do it over... I'm so tired. I just want to sleep. I closed the diary. Tears were streaming down my face. Mr. Reed put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Riley. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know what your grandmother had written." She made me promise not to open it. I looked at him. "Did you see what Aunt Diane did?" He nodded. "I saw her coming and going that last week. I saw the lawyer. Your grandmother told me once, a few months before she died, that she was worried about Diane. She said Diane had been stealing from her for years, but she didn't know how to stop it without losing her daughter completely. She loved Diane, even though Diane kept hurting her. Can I use this?" I asked, holding up the diary. "Can I prove what she did?" Mr. Reed looked sad. "I don't know, Riley, but you have to try." That night, I read the entire diary again. I took notes. I made a timeline of every instance of theft, every forged check, every manipulative request for money. And then I started planning. First, I called Emma. I need your help, I told her. I need to find proof of what my aunt did. Emma, brilliant, loyal Emma, didn't hesitate. What do you need? Grandma's bank records. I need to see proof of the money Aunt Diane stole. Can you help me access Grandma's online banking? Emma had been teaching herself coding and hacking for years. Within 2 days, she'd helped me access Grandma's old email account. Grandma had been meticulous. She'd kept digital copies of every bank statement, every canceled check, every credit card statement. We found it all. Transfers to Aunt Diane totaling over $75,000 in 10 years. The forged checks. The credit card theft. Everything. But that wasn't enough. We needed to prove that Aunt Diane had manipulated Grandma into changing the will while Grandma wasn't mentally competent. I called Rosa Martinez, the home health nurse who'd been caring for Grandma in those final weeks. Ms. Martinez, can I ask you about my grandmother's mental state in her last week of life? Rosa didn't hesitate. Riley, your grandmother was not mentally competent that last week. She was on high doses of morphine. She was confused most of the time. She didn't know what day it was. She called me by your mother's name multiple times. If someone had her signing legal documents during that time, that's a huge red flag. Would you be willing to testify to that? I asked. Absolutely, Rosa said. I kept detailed notes. Your aunt shouldn't have had a lawyer there. It was unethical at best, illegal at worst. Next, I called Mr. Patterson, the lawyer who'd drawn up the new will. This time, I wasn't a scared teenager. I was angry. Mr. Patterson, did you witness my grandmother's signature on that will yourself? He hesitated. I was called to the house. Ms. Diane Morgan said her mother wanted to update her estate documents. Was my grandmother alert when she signed? Longer hesitation. She seemed tired. She was dying, Mr. Patterson. She was on morphine. She didn't know what she was signing. And you let my aunt manipulate her. He cleared his throat. If you have evidence that Mrs. Morgan wasn't mentally competent, you have grounds to challenge the will. Oh, I have evidence, I told him. I have a lot of evidence. I spent the next 3 weeks building my case. Emma helped me organize everything into a presentation. Grandma's diary. 10 years of bank records showing theft. Rosa's medical notes documenting Grandma's incompetence. Testimony from Mr. Reed about Aunt Diane's neglect and sudden appearance. Testimony from other neighbors who'd watched me care for Grandma alone for 2 years. I took everything to a new lawyer, Mr. James Henderson, who specialized in estate disputes. He was in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a reputation for fighting for the underdog. I sat in his office and showed him everything. He read through the documents in silence. Finally, he looked up at me. Riley, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder financial abuse and undue influence I've ever seen. Your aunt stole from your grandmother for a decade. She manipulated a dying, mentally incompetent woman into changing her will. She committed fraud. Can we stop her? I asked. We can do better than that, he said. We can make sure she faces consequences. Mr. Henderson filed a legal challenge to the will. He also filed a report with the district attorney's office detailing Aunt Diane's decade of financial abuse. Within days, the house sale was frozen. The estate was frozen. Aunt Diane couldn't touch any of Grandma's money. 2 weeks later, we had a hearing. Aunt Diane showed up with her own lawyer, looking confident and polished in her designer clothes. She smiled at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Then Mr. Henderson presented our evidence. He started with Rosa's testimony. Rosa explained in detail that Grandma had been heavily medicated and confused in her final week. She testified that Grandma had not been mentally competent to make legal decisions. She testified that Aunt Diane had insisted on being alone with Grandma multiple times, sending both Rosa and me away. Next came Mr. Reed's testimony. He testified that in 20 years of friendship with Grandma, he'd seen Aunt Diane visit maybe a dozen times. He testified that Grandma had confided in him about Diane's stealing. He testified that he'd witnessed my dedication to Grandma's care. Then came the financial evidence. Bank records showing $75,000 transferred to Aunt Diane over 10 years. Forged checks. Credit card fraud. A paper trail of theft. And finally, the diary. Mr. Henderson read entries aloud in court. Grandma's words, in her own handwriting, detailing every instance of Diane's manipulation and theft. Detailing her love for me, detailing her intention to leave everything to me before Diane pressured her. I watched the color drain from Aunt Diane's face. Her lawyer asked for a recess. When we reconvened an hour later, Aunt Diane's lawyer made a statement. Ms. Morgan is prepared to settle. She will relinquish all claims to the estate in exchange for not being prosecuted for fraud. Mr. Henderson looked at me. It was my choice. I could push for prosecution. I could watch my aunt be charged with elder abuse and fraud. She could go to jail. Or I could take the settlement and move on with my life. I thought about Grandma. I thought about what she would want. And I realized that Grandma wouldn't want more fighting, more pain. She'd want me to be free. She'd want me to have the future she'd promised me. I accept the settlement, I said. But I want her to admit what she did. Out loud, in court. The judge ordered it. Aunt Diane had to stand up and formally admit that she had manipulated her dying mother into changing her will while her mother was not mentally competent. She had to admit to the financial theft. She had to apologize to the court, and to me, she did it. She stood there in her designer suit and said the words. But she never looked at me. She never actually apologized to me directly. She just said what she had to say to avoid jail time, and then she left. The original will was reinstated. The house became mine. The savings became mine. Every single thing my grandmother had wanted me to have, I got. Aunt Diane walked away with nothing. Actually, less than nothing. She had to pay back the $75,000 she'd stolen over the years. Her wages were garnished. Her boutique went bankrupt. Her reputation was destroyed. Everyone in Grandma's community knew what she'd done. If this story is breaking your heart like it broke mine, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt completely misunderstood or betrayed. I wish I could say that I felt pure satisfaction in that moment. But mostly I just felt tired and sad, because none of this brought Grandma back. None of this gave me back those 2 years of caregiving that I'd never regret, but that had cost me so much. None of this erased the trauma of being thrown out of my home, of thinking I'd lost everything, of feeling so powerless. But it did give me something. It gave me justice. It gave me the future Grandma wanted me to have. And it gave me proof that even when the system seems rigged against you, even when adults with money and power try to silence you, the truth matters. Evidence matters. Fighting back matters. I sold Grandma's house 6 months later. It was too hard to live there alone with all those memories. I used the money to enroll in art school. The same art school I'd dreamed about before Mom died, before everything fell apart. I'm finishing my first year now. I'm studying illustration. I'm creating again. I'm building the life that my mom and my grandmother both wanted for me. I still have Grandma's diary. I keep it on my bookshelf in my dorm room. Sometimes I read entries when I'm feeling lost. Grandma's words remind me that I'm strong, that I'm loved, that I deserve to be fought for. I never saw Aunt Diane again after the court hearing. I heard through Mr. Reed that she moved to a different state, that she's working retail to pay back the garnished wages, that she's alone. Part of me feels sorry for her. Part of me wonders how someone becomes so consumed by greed that they'd steal from their own dying mother. But mostly, I just feel free of her. I made new friends at art school. People who've never heard of Aunt Diane, who don't know about the court case, who just know me as Riley, the girl who draws and laughs and is building a life. Emma visits me on weekends. We get coffee and talk about normal things. She's studying computer science. She says she wants to use her hacking skills for good, to help people like she helped me. She's my hero. I also stay in touch with Mr. Henderson, the lawyer who fought for me. He told me that my case inspired him, that he's now taking on more estate abuse cases, specifically cases where elders are manipulated by family members. He said my courage to fight back gave other victims courage. I never thought of myself as courageous. I just thought of myself as someone who had no other choice. But maybe that's what courage is. Doing what you have to do even when you're terrified. On the first anniversary of Grandma's death, I visited her grave. I brought flowers from Mr. Reed's garden, the same flowers he used to bring her when she was alive. I sat on the grass and talked to her. I told her about art school. I told her about the case, about the diary, about how her words had saved me. I told her I was sorry that I couldn't protect her from Aunt Diane while she was alive. But I promised her that I'd made sure Diane couldn't hurt anyone else. I'd made sure the truth came out. I'd made sure Grandma's wishes were honored. I like to think she heard me. I like to think she's proud. The hardest part about all of this wasn't the legal battle. It wasn't living on Emma's couch or working double shifts at the coffee shop. The hardest part was learning that family doesn't always mean safety. That the people who are supposed to love you can be the ones who hurt you most. That sometimes, as a young person, you have to fight against the adults who are supposed to protect you. But I also learned that there are good people in the world. People like Emma, who showed up for me when I had nothing to offer in return. People like Mr. Reed, who kept Grandma's diary safe and gave it to me when I needed it most. People like Rosa, who documented the truth even when it was uncomfortable. People like Mr. Henderson, who believed an 18-year-old girl with a shoebox full of evidence. Those people saved me. I learned that your voice matters even when people try to silence you. Even when lawyers and adults and people with power tell you that you're wrong, that you're too young to understand, that you should just accept things as they are. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And if you fight hard enough, if you gather your evidence and find your allies, you can win. I learned that grief is complicated. I grieved for Grandma, but I also had to grieve for the aunt I thought I had, or the aunt I wanted to have. I had to grieve for the fantasy of a family that loved me. I had to accept that Aunt Diane was never going to be who I needed her to be. And that's okay. I don't need her. I have the family I've chosen. I have Emma. I have the memory of my mom and my grandmother. I have myself. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't understand when I was standing on that lawn with my duffel bags, watching my aunt smile her satisfied smile. I understand that being underestimated is actually a gift. Aunt Diane underestimated me because I was 18. Because I was grieving. Because I was just the granddaughter, just the kid. She thought I'd accept her theft and disappear quietly. She thought I had no power, but she was wrong. I had something she didn't have. I had the truth. I had people who loved me. I had my grandmother's words, written in her own hand, proving what really happened. And I had nothing left to lose, which made me dangerous. If you're watching this and you've experienced something similar, if you've been betrayed by family, if you've been left with nothing, if adults have dismissed you or manipulated you or tried to silence you, please hear me when I say this. You are not powerless. It feels like you are. It feels like the system is rigged against you, like no one will believe you, like you should just give up. But you're stronger than you know. Document everything. Find your allies. Tell your story. Fight back. The system isn't perfect. I got lucky because Grandma left me that diary, because I had Emma's tech skills, because Mr. Reed kept his promise, because Mr. Henderson took my case. Not everyone has those advantages. The legal system is expensive and complicated and often favors people with money and power. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. That doesn't mean your truth doesn't matter. I'm also not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have PTSD from those years of caregiving and the trauma of being thrown out. I still have nightmares about Aunt Diane's smile. I still struggle with trust. I'm in therapy, working through it all. Healing isn't linear. Some days I feel strong and vindicated. Other days I feel like that scared 18-year-old on the lawn holding everything she owns in 2 duffel bags. But I'm here. I'm building a life. I'm creating art that matters to me. I'm honoring my grandmother's memory by living the future she wanted for me. And I'm telling my story, because maybe it will help someone else who feels as alone and powerless as I once did. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of strength and vindication. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal or had to fight to be believed? Share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. None of us are alone. One more thing. If you're currently caring for an elderly or sick family member, please protect them. Document everything. Keep records. Watch for signs of financial abuse from other family members. Make sure your loved one has legal documents in place before they become too sick to make clear decisions. Talk to them about their wishes and make sure those wishes are documented properly with a reputable lawyer. Don't wait until it's too late. And if you're a young person who's being taken advantage of, who's being told you don't matter, who's being gaslit about your own experiences, trust yourself. Your perceptions are valid. Your experiences are real. Find adults who will listen and believe you. Document everything. Keep fighting. My grandmother used to tell me that Morgan women are fighters. She was right. But I learned something else too. You don't have to have the Morgan name to be a fighter. You just have to have the courage to stand up for yourself, to demand justice, to refuse to be silenced. And that courage is in all of us, even when we can't see it yet. I think about what I'd tell my 18-year-old self, standing on that lawn, if I could go back in time. I'd tell her that she's about to go through hell, that it's going to be harder than she can imagine. that she's going to doubt herself 1,000 times. But I'd also tell her that she's going to make it, that she's going to win, that she's going to honor her grandmother's memory in the most powerful way possible by living a life full of truth and art and justice. I'd tell her that Aunt Diane's smile isn't a smile of victory. It's a smile of someone who doesn't know the storm that's coming. Because that 18-year-old girl with 2 duffel bags, she's not powerless. She's not defeated. She's just getting started. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own future? Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything? Have you ever fought back against someone everyone else believed? I want to know. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. And the more we share them, the less power the manipulators and abusers and thieves have over us. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that an 18-year-old girl's voice mattered enough to hear the whole truth. I see you. I hear you. And if you're fighting your own battle right now, I'm rooting for you. You've got this. Morgan women are fighters, and so are you. The stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. We believe in supporting young people and treating all family members with love and respect. These stories are meant to inspire reflection on family relationships and the importance of compassion and truth. Any resemblance to real people, events, or families is purely coincidental and unintentional. These narratives carry no specific cultural, political, or religious implications.